Imagine being dragged through sun-baked streets while a crowd gathers, not to help you, but to watch you bleed. Your crime? Perhaps a whispered conversation with the wrong man, perhaps a jealous accusation from a rival wife, perhaps nothing at all. In ancient Egypt, a woman's body wasn't just her own. It belonged to her husband's honor, to her family's reputation, to the divine order itself. And when that order was threatened, real or imagined, the punishment wasn't designed to reform. It was designed to destroy. Beneath the golden monuments and the carefully painted tomb walls, there existed a justice system so brutal, so theatrically cruel, that even the scribes who recorded it seemed to write with trembling hands. These weren't just punishments. They were performances of power, staged in public squares where the line between justice and sadistic entertainment dissolved like salt in the Nile. Adultery, or even the faintest whisper of it, was the ultimate transgression for an Egyptian woman. Not because the gods particularly cared about her bedchamber activities, but because her body was a vessel for legitimacy. Every child she bore carried her husband's legacy, his claim to property, his connection to eternity itself. A single rumor could unravel entire dynasties. So when a woman was accused, whether the evidence existed or not, the response was immediate and vicious. Public flogging became the theater of humiliation, carried out not in the shadows but in broad daylight near temple enclosures and market squares, where merchants sold bread and priests sold salvation. The accused woman would be stripped, bound, and whipped with leather cords, sometimes embedded with fragments of bone or metal, while onlookers jeered and children were encouraged to watch. This wasn't about teaching her a lesson. She was already broken. This was about teaching everyone else. The Wilbur Papyrus, that dull administrative document listing land ownership, hints at something far darker in its rigid hierarchies. Women could own property, yes. They could represent themselves in court, technically. But when morality was questioned, those rights evaporated like water on hot stone. The New Kingdom legal texts reveal cases where women were convicted based solely on the testimony of their husbands or male relatives. No witnesses required, no defense permitted. One accusation was enough. One jealous whisper. One political inconvenience. Consider the harem conspiracy under Ramesses III, that bloody mess of ambition and paranoia that nearly toppled a dynasty. While history remembers it as a political plot, the court records preserved on the Turin Judicial Papyrus tell a different story about the women involved. They weren't masterminds. Most were servants, concubines, and minor wives who were probably coerced or manipulated into participation. But when the conspiracy unraveled, they bore the brunt of royal fury. The records describe public beatings so severe that some women didn't survive. Others were mutilated, their faces carved with the marks of shame before being cast out to die slowly of infection and exposure. The men, interestingly, were often granted the dignity of forced suicide, a blade and a private room. The women, they were beaten in the streets, their screams echoing off temple walls while priests continued their rituals inside, unbothered by the violence just beyond the sacred threshold. This wasn't unusual. This was policy. The spectacle was the point. Every crack of the whip, every cry of pain, every drop of blood soaking into the dirt was a message written in flesh. Step out of line, and this is what awaits you. But flogging, brutal as it was, left the victim alive, scarred but breathing. For some transgressions, the state demanded something more permanent, more visibly devastating. Nose-cutting, that exquisite cruelty, transformed a woman's face into a permanent billboard of her disgrace. The practice wasn't common among peasants. Common folk couldn't afford such elaborate revenge. But in the royal courts and noble households, where reputation was currency and bloodline was destiny, facial mutilation became the ultimate weapon. A woman suspected of adultery, particularly one whose alleged betrayal threatened legitimate heirs or political alliances, could be held down while a bronze blade carved away the center of her face. The nose, so prominent in Egyptian art, so essential to their ideals of beauty and completeness, was hacked off and discarded like waste. The Demotic Chronicle, written during the Persian occupation, describes how certain pharaohs were condemned by later generations for ordering such mutilations against both men and women. The text frames it as criticism, evidence of tyranny. But the very existence of these passages confirms that nose-cutting was practiced, was known, was feared. It was real enough to condemn centuries later. The symbolism was devastating. In a culture that believed facial integrity was necessary for recognition in the afterlife, to lose your nose was to lose your eternity. The dead were meant to be made whole through mummification, every feature preserved so the soul could reunite with its body. But a woman with a carved face? She was already spiritually dead. No amount of linen wrapping or natron salt could restore what was taken. She became unrecognizable to the gods themselves. And in life, the mutilation served as a walking warning. She couldn't hide it, couldn't cover it completely. Everyone who saw her knew immediately what she'd done, or what she'd been accused of doing. Truth didn't matter at that point. The scar told its own story. She would never marry again, never serve in the temple, never participate in the festivals and feasts that made up Egyptian social life. She became invisible while being constantly seen, a ghost haunting the edges of society until infection, despair, or starvation claimed her. The punishment wasn't just physical mutilation. It was social annihilation and spiritual erasure, all delivered in one brutal cut. And the cruelest part? There was no trial, no evidence required. A husband's accusation was often enough. A political rival's whisper, a priest's convenient vision. The blade fell regardless, and with it, any hope of justice, mercy, or redemption. But even nose-cutting, permanent and devastating as it was, offered the victim one grim consolation. She remained in Egypt, in the land blessed by the gods, near the Nile that gave life to everything. For the truly unforgivable, the state had a punishment that combined physical torment with geographical erasure. Exile to Renura, that cursed settlement on the edge of nowhere, where the damned were sent not to die quickly but to disappear slowly, forgotten by everyone except the vultures. Renaura, its very name derived from Greek words meaning cut nose, was the ancient world's dumping ground for human mistakes. Located along the desolate Sinai coast near modern Gaza, it was a place so harsh that even hardened criminals spoke of it with dread. The settlement sat on barren, salt-poisoned ground surrounded by sand dunes that shifted constantly, burying everything including the exiles themselves if they stayed still too long. Water was scarce, food scarcer. The few structures that existed were crumbling mud brick hovels that offered no protection from sandstorms or the scorching sun. This was where Egypt sent the people it wanted to forget, the ones whose crimes or mere existence had become politically inconvenient, but whose execution would raise uncomfortable questions. Women sentenced to Renura were typically those connected to palace intrigue, servants who knew too much, priestesses who had violated their vows, lesser wives implicated in conspiracies. While Egyptian legal documents rarely detail the sentencing process, classical sources like Diodorus Siculus and Strabo provide chilling descriptions. Diodorus specifically mentions that criminals were first mutilated, their noses cut off to mark them permanently, before being expelled to the settlement of the disfigured. These weren't just random criminals. Many were politically connected individuals whose crimes threatened the stability of the throne, but whose high birth made public execution problematic. So instead, they were mutilated and exiled, a solution that satisfied both justice and political convenience. The mutilation served multiple purposes. It marked the exile as permanently disgraced, making it impossible for them to blend back into society if they somehow survived and returned. It also stripped away their humanity in the eyes of their former peers. A woman without a nose wasn't really a woman anymore. She was a thing, a warning, a cautionary tale carved in flesh. Life in Ranura was designed to be unendurable. The exiles, marked by their carved faces, formed a grotesque community of the damned. Food had to be scavenged from the sparse vegetation or begged from passing trade caravans who would sometimes throw scraps at the mutilated inhabitants like one might feed stray dogs. Water came from brackish wells that caused dysentery more often than they sustained life. Disease was rampant. Infection from the mutilation wounds killed many within weeks of arrival. Those who survived the initial trauma faced a different kind of death, the slow erosion of hope and identity. Without names, without families, without even faces that resembled what they once were, the exiles became living ghosts. And for women, particularly those from noble households who had once known silk and perfume and servants, the degradation was complete. They had fallen from the heights of Egyptian society to literally the edge of the world, cast out into a wasteland where even the sun seemed angry. The psychological torture was perhaps worse than the physical conditions. These women knew that back in Egypt, their names were being erased from family records, their images chipped away from tomb walls, their children told that mother had never existed. In a culture where memory and legacy were everything, where the dead lived on through remembrance and offerings, this erasure was true death. They weren't just exiled from Egypt, they were exiled from eternity itself. But Ranura wasn't even the worst fate a woman could face in ancient Egypt. That distinction belonged to those rare cases where the crime was so severe, so threatening to the divine order, that death itself wasn't enough. The punishment had to carry spiritual weight, had to demonstrate that some violations couldn't be forgiven even by the merciful gods. Being buried alive served this purpose perfectly. It was death without honor, without ritual, without any hope of afterlife. The harem conspiracy provides the most documented example of this ultimate punishment. When Tiye, that ambitious secondary wife of Rameses III, orchestrated her plot to assassinate the pharaoh and install her son on the throne, she set in motion events that would end in spectacular cruelty. The conspiracy involved dozens of palace insiders, scribes, servants, magicians who created wax figurines for cursing, and women from the harem who acted as messengers and accomplices. When the plot was discovered, the judicial response was meticulously brutal. The Turin judicial papyrus records that over 40 people were tried by a special tribunal. The men were generally allowed to commit suicide, a dignified end that avoided the pollution of royal blood on the executioner's hands. But the women. The papyrus uses a euphemistic phrase. They were taken to a place and left there. Egyptologists have debated this wording for decades, but the consensus is chilling. They were buried alive. The method avoided the sacrilege of directly executing royal women while ensuring they died slowly and horribly. They would have been taken to some isolated location, perhaps a sealed chamber in the necropolis, perhaps a pit in the desert beyond the cultivation. Then, while still breathing, still screaming, they would have been covered with sand or sealed behind stone. No trial recorded their last words. No tomb preserved their memory. They simply vanished from the historical record as if they had never existed. The spiritual implications were catastrophic. Without proper mummification, without the opening of the mouth ceremony, without the correct prayers and offerings, their souls couldn't pass through the underworld. They couldn't be judged by Osiris or reunited with their Ka. They were condemned to eternal wandering, forever trapped between life and death, forever hungry, forever thirsty, forever alone. This was the true genius of the punishment. It didn't just end life, it destroyed the very concept of afterlife, that promise that made Egyptian existence bearable. Every peasant who toiled in the fields, every noble who schemed in the palace, did so knowing that death wasn't the end, that eternity waited beyond the western horizon. But these women were denied that comfort. Their punishment extended infinitely into forever, with no hope of redemption or rest. So, which punishment carved deepest into Egyptian society? The flogging that broke bodies in public squares? The nose cutting that erased identity and eternity? The exile to Renura that cast women into geographical and social oblivion? Or the burial alive that denied even death's consolation? Perhaps the answer is that they all served the same purpose: to remind everyone that in ancient Egypt, especially if you were a woman, your body was never truly your own. It belonged to the state, to your husband, to the gods, to the eternal order that kept the Nile flowing and the sun rising. Step outside that order, challenge it even slightly, and the punishment wouldn't just end your life. It would erase you completely, from memory, from family, from the very fabric of existence. The temples still stand, magnificent and eternal, but the screams of those women, carved, beaten, buried, exiled, have long since faded into the sand. History tried to bury these stories as thoroughly as it buried their victims. But the stones remember, even if the scribes chose to forget. The question isn't which punishment was cruelest. The question is why we're so comfortable forgetting it happened at all.